Hey folks, it's Rob Flux here with another Sunday session, and today it's open mic night. Open mic night is your chance to ask me any question that you like, and I'll do my best in order to respond to that. Now, in order to do that, click on the links below and submit your question early. That allows me to then do whatever research I need to do to try and help you and give you the best answer known to man. And that said, we've got an action-packed session today with a ton of questions, both from you guys submitting questions and also from a few that we've gleaned from our Facebook community that we thought might add some value to the process. So, but the preferred approach is, I guess, punch them into that link below. So that is propdev.info/open-mic. That said, let's get into it. So first question comes from Rashid. So Rashid is saying there's some talk about stagflation and how will that affect the property market specifically for developers like us? Now, Rashid, really appreciate the question, but I am not a property economist, so I'm not probably going to do due justice to this particular question. But stagflation is a challenge where you've got, I guess, inflation going up that actually causes a recession, which is the opposite to way most things actually happen. So typically recession happens because the fact that the economy has actually stalled. So it's when a whole bunch of things happen that don't typically happen in a normal recession, but it is a recession, but it's caused by inflation. Now, in our instance, inflation is coming down. So I don't personally think that stagflation is going to happen. So I'm not sure where you're seeing that actually out in the marketplace, but I don't think it will actually occur in this particular instance. Now, that said, inflation has been high for quite some time and is coming down. And all of the banks are predicting that somewhere in the October, November, December mark, they're anticipating the very first interest rate cut. Now, nobody actually knows. Reserve Bank of Australia will be the one who actually determines that. But Reserve Bank are trying to aim for a between 2 and 3% inflation rate. So if they don't, so at the moment it's coming down. It's been high for quite some time, but it's coming down at a fairly rapid rate of knots. And if they don't start to take the brakes off, or put the brakes on, I should say, they've got a very big danger of overshooting the mark. Okay, and so if they overshoot the mark, then they have to go very hard, reducing interest very fast. And the problem with that is if they do that too fast, that means that everybody can borrow heaps of money all at the same time. And because of that, they will, which then means that people will start paying way too much, which then pushes inflation back up again. So they need to slow it down gently. So I don't think stagflation will happen. But again, I'm not a property economist. So will it affect us? I don't think so. So there you go. But again, not an economist. So now Lee says, hello, Rob. I really love the content that you've provided. They're super educational and informative. And I now have a question that I hope you can help to answer. Thank you, Lee. Appreciate that. In your scenario of 6 townhouse development, say the project returns 20% profit on cost, you mentioned before, you can sell 5 and keep 1 unencumbered. No tax to pay on the profit. It's all trapped in the last one. Can you please confirm if my understanding is correct? So yes, but I want to, I guess, qualify this. And again, not an accountant, so you're going to need to go and validate all of this for yourself. Okay. If you sell, how do I articulate this? Firstly, if you are doing a development, then GST applies. If you are doing a long-term buy and hold, then capital gains tax applies. What you've got going on here is a development of which you intend to hold one and turn it into a long-term buy and hold. So there's a period of time, and I believe that period of time is 5 years, where if you sell the property inside that 5 years, then GST would apply to that one particular property. If you hold it for longer term, then capital gains tax applies. So the assumption here is your intention. Your intention is to develop all 6, but to sell 5 and keep 1 long-term for that long-term buy and hold type approach. Now, based on that approach, so long as you go past the 5-year mark, then what I'm going to say should, and please validate with your accountants, should start to apply. So you develop 6, but you are selling 5. So you can only claim 5/6 of the GST. So for your town planner, your architect, your construction costs, all those sorts of things, you're going to claim 5/6 of the GST for those. Okay. And so you're going to, when you sell the properties, you're going to pay GST for those. And you're going to claim the margin tax for those. And you're going to claim the imputation credits that you've claimed before for those and those alone. Now, the 1/6, the one that was left over, that unfortunately is just a hard cost. And that goes on to what is called the base cost, or I guess I think that's not the right term, but I guess the cost to construct that particular last property. So the cost to construct had some town planning costs, 1/6. It had some architecture costs, 1/6. It had some construction costs, 1/6. So that base cost plus the GST that you've actually, I guess, not claimed, then becomes the cost price or the baseline that your future capital gain will be deemed by if at some point in the future you sell that particular property. So long as you keep it for more than 5 years, then that base, when you sell it in 10, 15, 20 years time, that base becomes the base for your capital gain. Okay. If you sell it inside the 5 years, then you have to go back and clean up all of the other ones before, because you did 5/6 of the GST before. Now you're going to have to be doing 6/6, I guess 100%. So you will have to do some remediation of that. But the intention is that you're going to hold it and to keep it. And so for that particular purpose, because you didn't sell the property, you don't realize the profits at that point in time. You're going to realize them in 10, 15, 20 years time when you go to sell. And at that point, it's converted from GST to capital gains. And so that's really what we're talking about here. Now, please, please, please go and validate that with your accountant to make sure that that is actually going to suit your particular circumstances and your particular needs. But if that's the case, if it does work, then the whole concept is that you've kept 100% of the profits in the deal, which means that it's 100% of the profits that's going to grow with the market. So that's the idea. Now we've got another question, I guess, on that same concept, which is the 20% profit on cost. So I might, just because of the fact that the way you asked that question, and we've got a second question on this, I might actually re-articulate the problem or the opportunity that sits in front of everyone so they understand. Most developers are aiming for a 20% profit on cost for their projects. So based on that, the magic number is 6. If you sell 5, the 5 pays the cost for all of the construction and all of the total development cost of that particular project, which means that there is no debt remaining on that 6th one. Now, there is a mathematical debt. Okay, mathematical debt is that baseline that I was actually talking to. That's that baseline cost. But there's no actual hard debt. Okay, so that's really what we're trying to I guess aim for. So based on that, Martin has got a question. So regarding the principle of the 20% profit on cost, if I own that property free and clear, how do I draw equity out? Either get a line of credit for that property development, or particularly, for the next development, particularly if you have no bank servicing. Okay, Martin, so this is one for your own particular circumstances and very, very hard for me to, I guess, give you some specific commentary on it. But you have, in principle, you have a property that is owned outright with no debt, free and clear. You've got 100% passive cash flow because there is no debt to actually service. So the asset itself is very, very, very high yielding. Now, depending upon the entity that you actually own this in, you may be able to go to your funder and say it stands alone in its own right. So if you're doing this in your own personal name, which I do not recommend, but if you're doing it in your own personal name, then you have to include it with your wage, any other investment properties you've got, and all that sort of thing. And they're going to look at the servicing of everything all together. If, however, it is self-contained within an entity of some description, and knowing that you're going to be doing a long-term buy and hold, it makes sense for that to be in an entity that has the long-term capital gains tax discount. So if you do that, then because it's standalone, you might be able to argue to the bank, hey, I just want it to be assessed on its own merits. It's able to wash its own face is the expression. And so long as you can demonstrate to the bank that all of your other affairs are in order, and that I guess you can currently service all of your other debts in every way, shape, or form, then this one can stand on its own 2 feet. So that's what you're trying to do. Now, in order to do that, not every bank will actually look at that particular scenario, but many banks will. So you might have to go through a broker and shop around in order to get that outcome. Now, if you do that, the plausible outcome, depending upon, I guess, the equity in the property and the amount of rent that it's actually generating, you could plausibly pull out a line of credit and use that to, I guess, pull out as cash and then go and inject in the next project, which is what you're talking about. If, however, for some miraculous reason you can't get that loan, then there is an alternative solution. The alternative solution is you have a property that has no debt, so there is no mortgage against it. So on the next development project, you may be able to go to the development lender there and say, hey, can you use this property and the equity contained in this property as the security, as the equity for this particular loan? And that is also an alternative way that might actually work for you. So either way, you should be able to leverage that for your next deal. And that's the key to this in order to allow you to scale your projects. Next question comes from Nisha. Nisha says, hi, Rob. Thanks for the opportunity to ask a question. I'm building a detached duplex in regional New South Wales. I have a development approval and ready to build. How do I tender out the build pricing for various builders so they come back and I can compare apples with apples? Do I send out my plans and ask them for a medium quality build with a turnkey and then compare the inclusions and decide based on best value for money? Or do I give them all the same list of inclusions needed so when they come back to their their quote is like for like? I know which one is best. I know which one is best price they're providing, then customized to my needs. Any advice will be helpful, as I haven't done this before. If there are any templates or similar for you for your past projects, would be great. Okay, so I'll answer the last one first, Nisha. So all of my templates and that sort of thing, I only provide to my students. So yes, I do have templates and that sort of thing for that. But unfortunately, that's just something that I provide for my students. Otherwise, if I'm giving that to everyone, what value am I actually giving to them? But I do give them a whole bunch of other value as well. So now to answer your question, and that's the most important part, you've correctly identified the 2 different approaches. So well done for doing that. But you asked specifically, how do I compare apples with apples? The only way to compare apples with apples is to give them the exact same scope of work up front. So give them a schedule that actually goes through all the fixtures and fittings and the finishes that you actually want to have. Now, there's 2 ways to actually come up with that. So firstly, you could ask them all for a copy of their inclusions and look at all of their inclusions and go, look, I like this tap, I like those tiles, I like this particular sink, and you cherry pick the best ones from each of them. You see what's in common to all of them, and you try to find, I guess the baseline for that. Or alternatively, you go out to 3 approaches. Alternatively, you could go out to an interior designer who will actually build that build spec for you, and they look at the demographic of the area. They look at, I guess, the kind of product that you're trying to create, the quality that you're trying to get to, and they will come up with a list of inclusions that actually has brands, makes, models, and that sort of thing together. So they can give you that as a list. Or alternatively, you can go do that yourself, but given that you're not a qualified interior designer, you might not get a perfect feel. What we're looking for is the sum of the parts is greater than the whole. An interior designer has studied this for years and years, and they know that, look, this type of tile and this kind of paint on the wall, they're going to blend together really nicely and get a nice outcome. I personally can't do that. That's not a skill set I've got. Can I choose colors? Yes. Are they nice colors? I think so, but does that actually suit the subtleties that's hidden within the tile and draw out the best feature? Probably not. That's where the interior designer is really good at actually making all of the individual elements work together as one cohesive unit. So my guidance would be, go to an interior designer, get them to put together the schedule of finishes for you, provide that to the builders and say, this is the schedule of finishes, and ask them for an exact quote on that. Now, whilst you could do that, you're going to find that some builders have preferred suppliers and they get much, much better pricing from their preferred supplier. And so they might have a similar look and feel to what you've asked for, but on an alternative brand. So what you can say is, look, quote me for the exact thing, and then as a variation, what is called value engineering, can you show me any elements where you can give me a better solution for that one thing? So that not only are you now comparing apples with apples, but you're also showing or giving the builder the opportunity to say, look, I can do better for you if you trust me and use my inclusions and my relationships. Okay, so that's going to be, that's the best way that you can compare everything, and make sure that the scope of works is identical, that everyone is comparing. The last thing is have a look at what when they respond, what they take as out of scope. Okay, so it's great that they've said, hey, these things are in scope, but that sometimes they'll do these little subtleties of what is out of scope. And so you need to go back to them and either get a quote for what those out of scope items might be, or alternatively remove that out of scope out of everyone so that they're all identical. So hoping that helps. Now, in doing so, some of the things that I would be asking for would be a timeline for them to actually construct, and ideally a Gantt chart. So that is the project breakdown to say what tasks they're going to do in what order. That's going to tell you, because you might get one builder who's $50,000 cheaper, but he's going to take 3 months longer to build. By the time you do your holding costs, you've probably burnt that 50,000 in holding costs. So understand from a Gantt chart perspective, why is he taking 3 months longer? Then you can actually have a very quality conversation with them. The other thing you could do is you could do a breakdown of labor. So show me how much of the that quote is your chippy, how much is your sparky, how much is your tiler, how much is your concreter, those sorts of things. You could also do a breakdown of a bill of materials as well. So that way it's very, very clear to go, when I'm comparing all of my builders, hey, one builder has said that the cost of concrete is 3 times higher, and yet the other builders have not. So is that something where perhaps somebody's made a mistake in their assessment, or perhaps they've misinterpreted the scope, or maybe the guys that came in cheaper made the mistake, right? So, but it gives you a conversation starter either way. Hope that helps either way. So thank you, Nisha. Next question comes from Kate. Kate says, how to get access to cost-effective house designs apart from slowly building your own collection and test it by trial and error. Well, there's a couple of different ways you can do this, Kate. Now, the easy way to do this is to go to, there's a whole bunch of builders display villages that sit out there, depending upon where you're physically located. You could go into every single one of those project builders, and most of them will actually have a book of plans, and they'll give away that book of plans for free. Quite often they'll have 50, 100, 150 house designs, and they're all different 10 months, that sort of thing. So that's a good way of picking up a whole bunch of design. You can also go to a whole bunch of websites where they specialize in house and land packages. There's a bunch of them that actually sit out there. One of them that stands out is one called ibuildnew.com.au. And again, they've got about 900 odd house designs that sit on there. The other ones would actually have those as well. So you can actually pick them up from there. And also there are, I guess, architects that actually put all of their house designs online, and you can actually just purchase them, again, a little bit like I guess a catalog with a couple of hundred designs. There's a dozen or so of these people that actually sit out there. One that comes to mind is one called australianhousedesigns.com.au, and you can search on the different style. You can search on, I guess, the width of the block. You can search on, is it flood impacted, slopey sites, all that sort of stuff. So they're the easy ways to actually put it together. Either way, remember that those house designs are intellectual property and belong to, I guess, the supplier of those. So they're more for inspiration to give you some ideas as to what can actually do. You can't just go and plagiarize them. So please, please, please don't do that. Okay, next one. I guess it's just an initial, K Cola. I'm not sure who K is. I have a $1 million borrowing capacity, currently have 4 investment properties in different states. The goal is to reduce the working hours and pay my principal place of residence off. I want to focus on property development independently without needing a 9-to-5 job anymore. That's a statement. It's not really a question, but I guess in picking up the statement, I'm going to try and read between the lines in what you're actually trying to do here. It looks like so far you've been an investor, okay? And now an investor and a property developer are very, very, very different. An investor will tend to buy a property and hold that for a long period of time and wait for the capital uplift. And that capital uplift will then, I guess, make them asset rich. It won't necessarily make them cash flow rich. So what you've said is you've got 4 of these with $1 million borrowing capacity. I don't know if that means you've got another $1 million or if you've got a total of $1 million, which means that you've only got the 4. Either way, your intention is to pay off your principal place of residence. So I guess you've got tax deductible debt and non-tax deductible debt. Have a look at those 4 properties that you've got, and you should be doing this on a regular basis. Now, firstly, understand what was the purpose that you invested in that property in the first place. Now, if it's a investment, there's only 2 purposes: capital gains, cash flow. Okay, so whatever your intended purpose was, if you know and are clear on what that intended purpose was, the first question you should ask yourself is, right here, right now, is that property performing as intended? Okay, now if it's performing as intended, then the next question is, what is the likelihood it will continue to perform as intended? Okay, and then the next question after that is, knowing what I know right here, right now, can I do better than what that property is actually doing? Now, that's going to give you a whole bunch of answers depending upon your current circumstance in life and the property in question. So let's go through a couple of scenarios. Is it performing as intended? Yes. Is it going to continue to perform as intended? Yes. Your intention is to then become a property developer, but do you have the skills in order to do that right now? No. So if that's the case, then do you keep that property? Yes, because it's doing exactly what you intended to do. It's serving you well, and you can't do better with that. So that's fantastic outcome. Now let's do a different scenario. Is it performing as intended? No. Okay. Will it likely perform as intended? No. Even without my property development skills, could I do better? Yes, you could cash that in and reload into another investment property if that was your original plan, and at least get your money working. Okay, so go through those scenarios, and there's going to be mixtures of everything in between. So is it doing as intended? Yes. Is it going to continue? Yes. Do I have the skills for property development? Yes. Well, then, do I sell right now? That depends. Have I got a deal I need to put the cash into? If I don't have a deal, it's performing well, keep it for a while, but know that it's sacrificial, and go, at some point in time, if I need the money for this deal because I know I can do better myself, then I know that that's one I could actually target. But by going through that scenario and doing that on a regular basis every couple of months, in every property in your portfolio, what that's going to give you is a list of properties that you could and should be culling in order to get your money to work a little bit harder for you. So hoping that helps you, mate. Next question comes from Rebecca. Now, Rebecca's question's quite long, so give me a sec. Hi, Rob. We're doing a 1:7 development in South Australia. Well done. We have organised to purchase extra land from our back neighbour. Our builder's town planner initially told us that the council will require us to purchase 235 square metres of land from the neighbour. Unfortunately, due to our friendship with the neighbour, we told him this would be the case. We then hired our own personal town planner, who's a gun, and he said, according to the state code, we only need to purchase 105. So perhaps you're buying too much land, is the inference. Our town planner has spoken to the council, and they are pushing for the extra land. So our town planner has hired a property lawyer on his own dime to get legal advice. The difference for us is $100,000 plus. Our neighbour is expecting us to purchase the larger parcel of land, so he's already spending the money mentally. Due to the difference of opinion, the contract for the land sale hasn't been drawn up yet, so we have decided it should say we'll purchase the amount of land based upon the development approval. Our neighbour has asked for a decent deposit, as this may take a while. Have you got any advice for this situation? Is there anything you would recommend we do and make sure we put in contract moving forward? Any input greatly appreciated. Wow, that's a messy one, Rebecca. So firstly, the first thing I would say is you need to document it now. It sounds like you've already lodged for development approvals and you've got an unknown outcome. What happens if your neighbour changes their mind? What happens if they sell the property? What happens if they die? What happens if their personal circumstances change? You've got nothing in writing, so you need to document it now. As a matter of fact, you should have documented it before going through this process, okay? Now, that said, what do you document for? I would suggest, as you have indicated, because there's some conjecture, that you'll purchase on a $1 per square metre rate based on, I guess, the amount of land that council, I guess, puts within their development application. So then, but you would give a high end and a low end of the range, so that it's very clear that, look, council may not want this much, they may want this much. So it could be anywhere between X and Y dollars that you actually receive in your pocket. Make sure that that's in the contract and very clear. But the $1 per square rate that you're paying is also very, very clear. The next thing, so that's what you put into the contract. The next thing, understanding the impact being $100,000 to you, that's the direct cost. I also want you to start to think about, well, if you do have some extra land, that means that the finished product will also have extra land. And so is that going to increase the saleability of the finished product? And will that make that worth more money at the end? So perhaps your profitability of the deal will actually go up, as opposed to creating these tiny little shoe boxes that won't have much land and the saleability might be low. So understanding the direct cost, I guess there's an opportunity here to I guess also get a little bit more profit out of the deal if it's actually going to make the product more saleable. So think about both sides of the equation before, I guess, trying to just reduce cost. Otherwise, you might be penny wise because you paid less, but pound poor because you didn't receive the extra revenue from selling the 7 townhouses that were all larger in size. Now, noting you're trying to do 7, that extra 100 odd square meters is another 10, 15 square meters per lot. That can actually make quite a bit of difference in the outcome. So consider all of that. What other things would I actually put into it? Firstly, again, reinforcing, get it documented now. But does that actually change the look and feel of those townhouses is probably the most critical element in all of that. Hoping that helps, Rebecca. Next one comes from Zaina, I should say. Hi all, I have a question for seasoned developers. I'm about to start running civils next month for the property. It's a 2x5 lot, one being a strata title, and it has an access easement. What stage do I need to get a lawyer involved? Thank you. Now, I'm assuming that you're talking about the lawyer getting involved from an easement perspective, but there are many, many other times that the lawyer would need to be involved. So firstly, the easement needs to be created, I guess, once you have the survey plan done that actually documents where the easement is actually needing to go. Now, there's multiple different kinds of easement that can be created. And depending upon what the easement is, depends on whose lawyer actually does the work. So for example, I guess if it's an easement for stormwater, then who owns the stormwater? Now, if it's council, then it's council's lawyer that actually does the stormwater, okay? Now, if it's sewer, then who owns the sewer? Okay, so that was typically going to be a utility provider. So it'd be the utilities provider lawyer that actually draws up the easement. If it's an access easement, who owns the easement? Well, currently you do. So then it's your lawyer who's actually going to draw that up. So the which lawyer is just as important as when to engage the lawyer. Now, they could draw up the paperwork for the terms and conditions of the easement, but you can't actually endorse or stamp that until you have a development approval in place. So they can have the verbiage done, but you can't actually finish the project and what they call stamp the plans until the development application is done. So my guidance would be, wait until you've got the DA already formally approved by council, then engage. In this case, it sounds like it's an access easement. So the access easement is going to be your lawyer. So I would be engaging them as soon as practical. Remembering you've got to construct a whole bunch of things, the lawyer will take time. If you engage them at the very, very start of the process while you're constructing everything, that allows them to do things in their own time, and you don't have to put a lot of time pressure on them. What a lot of people tend to do is they wait until everything's finished and then go get the easements done, and then they're harassing their solicitor going, hey, hurry up, hurry up. And so the solicitor has to drop everything in order to do that. And a lot of times they can't drop everything because they've got other issues and challenges that they need to deal with in their own workforce. So be very, very careful, in planning that out, okay? Next question comes from Martin. Martin says, thoughts on which selling agent is the right one to sell my duplexes, my duplex development? Any wisdom appreciated. Now he's named some people, so because he's named them, I will name them. Mary, she brought the development site to me. No agreement that I had to sell through her though, but not known to sell high and finish duplex project like mine. She charges 1.5% commission. Okay. Next one, Chris is a local agent who's helped me here and there over many, many years where I got stuck with a development, charges 1.75% commission. And Troy sold 3 comparable duplexes in the last 3 months and gotten a really good price for each of them, charges 2.2%. So Martin is asking which agent would I actually be going through. So firstly, Martin, recognize that some agents are fantastic to buy through and some agents are fantastic to sell through. Now, the selling part is super important. 1, because you're going to get a higher price, and 2, because the speed of that sale means you're going to be paying much, much, much less holding costs. So what you're looking at is just one dimension of the cost, that is the agent's commission. So if you look at, in this instance, on the surface of it, Troy is the best placed. He's got the most experience. He's sold 3 comparable projects, really gotten a really good price for all of them. So he's the best agent, but he's also charging the highest rate. So calculate, well, if he got a higher price at that higher rate, how much cash in the pocket would I actually get? Now go to Mary, who charges a much lower commission. Would they get the higher sales price? And again, whilst it's a lower commission, it's on a lower price. What's the actual cash in your pocket? Then add on top of that, how much longer would Mary take to sell that property compared to how long Troy would actually take to sell that property? Troy might be selling it in 1 month. Mary might be selling it in 3. What's the holding cost difference between those two? Add all of those up, and then what you'll find is there's a very clear winner with regards to cash in your pocket, and that is the most important part. Okay, we tend to look at just the agent's commission and go, this agent is charging us way too much compared to that agent. But you know what? They're earning it, right? In some instances anyway, they're earning it. And if that's the case, I've got more money in my pocket, then they deserve the extra cash, mate. So have a think about that. Do the math. I don't know what the actual answer is, and I just realized I just did a Donald Trump type hand gesture. I'm never going to do that ever again. Sinead, so that helps, Martin. Next one, Sinead. My husband and I have taken our first steps engaging a drafty and surveyor to get the ball rolling and hopefully developing our own block. We have 1,100 square meters in beautiful Lake Macquarie. We've been owner-occupier, and the home has seen us start our married lives together and welcome our 2 children. And it's very bittersweet to be starting. My question to you is this. What are some things that you wish you'd known when you did your first development? Hit me with your do's and don'ts and anything you'd love to share. Thanks in advance. We look forward to being on this journey. Okay, Sinead, a couple of things I can actually say here. So firstly, just because you can doesn't mean you should, okay? you purchased this property with a view to being lifestyle, and by your own admission, it has served your lifestyle needs for many, many, many years. That does not mean it's going to make a great development site. It is definitely developable. You've already identified that, but doesn't mean that it's actually profitable. What you should do, right? Because you've got a whole bunch of capital gains that have happened since you've owned it, and that capital gains is tax-free because this has been your principal place of residence up until this point in time. So if you sold it today, then you would be able to sell that and have that capital gains tax-free. But if you do a development, then any development uplift is going to be taxed. And so what you don't want to do, you want to be able to separate those two out. So the first thing is, if you did that, I want you to pretend that you never bought it 20 years ago. I want you to pretend that you're buying it in today's market today, okay? How much money would you actually be paying for that property? And would that development actually make sense? Now, if you do that calculation, pretending that's the case, it's called a baseline. So what you're doing by baselining the project, you're going, well, if I bought it in today's market, if I bought next door, for example, would that actually be a deal? Now, if the answer is yes, it's a deal, then yes, do the deal. If the answer is no, it's not, then chances are you doing the development is just unlocking the capital equity uplift that you've already generated through the process of owning it for all these years. So you, A, going to complicate your world by adding, I guess, this as a project, and B, you're going to complicate your tax side of things because of the fact that, I guess, currently you've got all of this tax-free, and then what you're doing is unlocking a deal that may or may not be a shitty deal and paying extra tax on it for no reason at all. So baseline it. Super important that you actually baseline it. That's the first part. Second part, let's just assume that it is developable. Okay. Maybe, and this is something that you want to go talk to your accountant about, maybe what you might want to do is make it very, very clean between you, the human that's owned this as your principal place of residence, and you, the developer, who is actually going to develop the land. And do you sell it to yourself in order to clear those two and make a very, very clear wall between those two? Now, if you do, yes, there's some stamp duty implications of actually doing that. But what it means is there's no complications at all. There's no discrepancies. There's no chance of it eroding some of your capital growth that you've actually had. Now, if you choose to do that, then everything's very, very clear. Line in the sand has actually been drawn. Makes your life super simple. If you choose not to do that, then you're going to have to do that with some sort of paper trail in order to do that. So the paper trail should go get a valuation of your property right here, right now, as to what that's actually worth. So you can actually argue the fact that your capital growth up until that point in time was very, very clear, very known. But then go talk to your accountant as to what the best approach to that is. Now, because it's in your own personal name, I guess if you do the development and keep it in your title, that could be adding income tax to you. Now, income tax, I guess, has thresholds, and depending upon how much profit this deal actually makes, you might be paying 45 cents in the dollar from an income tax perspective on the profits that you actually make. Whereas if you sell it to yourself while you're paying stamp duty right now, you're only paying company tax on the profits, and the company tax being 25 cents in the dollar plus the elements of it. So do math. Be very, very clear that you do the math and you actually differences between it. Now, I don't know of your deal. I don't know the price points of everything. Sometimes it makes sense to do the sale. Sometimes it makes sense to keep it in your own name, but have that conversation with your accountant. The next thing is education. Education is key. Firstly, it fast tracks your journey. It's going to make your project run much faster. It's going to limit your mistakes, and most importantly, it's an insurance policy to make sure that if you are going to make mistakes, somebody can actually sit over your shoulder and go, "Hey, there's a better way of actually doing this," or "Hey, you forgot about this element over here? What are these hidden costs that you'd actually completely forgotten about?" So please, please, please educate yourself as much as humanly possible. Hoping that helps, Sinead, hoping that you get plenty out of that one. Hamed says, looking at beginning construction soon and having a conversation with builder about the more economical option for house frame, be it steel or timber. What's the main pros and cons of each? and in the current supply climate. So Hamid, this is going to sound a little bit blasé, but who cares? Who cares what the underlying frame of the house is, because you're going to be putting insulation and cladding and all sorts of things over the top of that. Right here, right now, that changes all the time based on timber shortages, based on have there been bushfires and climate change and all sorts of things like that. Is there a glut on steel? Is the cost of iron ore gone up? There's a whole bunch of things where one day timber's going to be cheaper and the next day steel's going to be cheaper. I don't care which solution it is. Go talk to your builder right here, right now, and say, right now, which one is cheaper from where you can actually get? Because once the cladding is on, nobody can see that, okay? Now, that's going to change depending upon what part of the country you're in. That's going to change depending upon the purchasing power of your particular builder and a whole bunch of other things that go into that. The key factor is you want to reduce your costs. So your builder and your builder alone is the only person who can actually implement that. But I don't have any preference at all with regards to, I guess, which particular material I'm actually using. As a matter of fact, a whole bunch of prefab or a whole bunch of eco blocks or things like that are also alternative ways of actually doing a frame. Talk to your builder about that. Why are you limiting yourself to only two different frame technologies? You're using steel or using timber. Why can't you use a polystyrene block that's concrete reinforced, for example, where you're going to get very, very good insulation techniques from that? Why can't you be doing, I guess, a prefabricated panel that is manufactured in a factory and then delivered to site? Lots of different ways of doing that. You're only looking at two things in the equation. Next one, Erin says, hi there, does anyone know how to search for development applications on the New South Wales planning portal? I'm not trying to look for it, sorry. I'm not trying to look for a specific application, but rather see what developments are happening in the area. I know how to do this through my local council portal. Just wondering if there's a way to do it statewide. Thank you and much appreciated. So Erin, I'm going to answer this for the wider community, noting that we are Australia-wide. You've asked this for New South Wales only. But typically what you'll find from the wider perspective is that it is going to be your local council that gives you the answer. And sometimes they keep those development applications forever on their system, and other times they only keep it for a point in time whilst that development application is alive. So you need to be very, very conscious of that and be searching for it ongoing throughout time, okay? Now, the majority of states do not have a central repository for all development applications at all, okay? However, there is a third party. They are called planningalerts.org, okay, planningalerts.org. What they do is they monitor all of the local councils all the way around the country, and they keep track of all of those. So my guidance to you is go to planningalerts.org and monitor your development applications there. Now, it is an open source tool, which means that it is for the community, by the community, and you may find that they have not built the alerts for your particular council. So they will give you some step-by-step instructions on how you can actually do that, and you can plug that into your council, then it will start alerting you forever based on that particular council. So know that that's the case. Now, I'm not quite sure how to pronounce this particular name. Haychch. Is there a way to increase the floor space ratio? And if so, how is it likely to succeed? Based in Sydney. Okay, so floor space ratio is the amount, is the ratio of the habitable space to the land component. Okay, so now that is determined differently in each state. So sometimes it is site coverage that's measured, sometimes it's GFA that's measured. So there's a slight different, I guess, definition and interpretation for the math in every single state. But the principle is the same nonetheless, and that is how much habitable space have we got as a ratio to the land that I've actually got. Now, typically that's going to be very clearly defined within the rules or within the codes of each particular council in the city plan, and you're going to be able to do a mathematical formula on that. Now, what is in the rules is the rules. the rules say thou shall or shall not actually get away with that. Okay, now if you are within the rules, that means that you're going to 100% be able to get an approval. If you are not within the rules, then you can do what they call a performance-based solution. Now, performance-based solution does not guarantee that you'll get an outcome. What it means is you can put an argument to council and say, look, based on the particular scenario of this particular site, I can see that we've got some other constraints that we're actually trying to overcome. And in this instance, I think it's better for both the site and council and the community as a whole that we get this performance solution out there. Now, because it's a performance-based solution, it is going to have to go out for public consultation. The community is then going to have their say on it. Council will consider what the community has to say and the impact on the community, and they may or may not approve it. Okay, so there is a risk in going for performance-based solutions to try and push the density of your development application. So please, please, please make sure that you are not reliant on that extra uplift in order for your feasibility to work. Make sure that the rules are going to still make the deal actually profitable. And if you get the extra uplift, then that's going to give you, I guess, some extra profit in the deal. But don't be relying on it as your outcome. Okay, hope that helps. Next one comes from Grace. Grace says, what percentage would you put your contingency as, and is it over the construction costs only, or is it over your total development costs? So Grace, this is one of those things that really comes down to a combination of your experience as a developer and also, I guess, the risk of the deal itself. So if it's just a very, very basic I guess, development, and you've done many of these, and there's not many issues or challenges, then you might have that as low as 5%. Okay. If you've never done a development before, or there's some issues or challenges that are actually going to sit on the site, slope, or maybe there's some flooding or things like that, and so there's some variables and some unknowns and uncertainties on that, then you're going to ratchet that up, and you might take that as high as 15%, for example. But I'm going to say, if it's your very, very first deal, and it's a relatively simple site, just go right in the middle. Go for about 10% of your contingency. Now, it is not over the entire total development cost, but rather over the elements that are variable in that process. So, for example, purchase price is known. You know exactly what that is. The stamp duty that's associated with the purchase price is known. You know exactly what that is. Okay, but the cost to construct is variable. You're not sure what that's going to be at this point in time. You're not sure what the cost of your sewer and your stormwater and all those sorts of things are going to be. So it's only the variable items that the contingency starts to apply to. You know, for example, your sales commission and what that should be. So, if you do that, then yes, the contingency is a relatively high number, but it's a relatively high number on just a portion of the costs, and so that doesn't vary too much. Now, one of the key things that I would say from a contingency, where a lot of people get a lot of things terribly wrong, you need to have the contingency as a cost to your project. You need to assume that that money is spent, and your profit needs to be profitable, irrespective of whether or not you spend that contingency. Okay. That way, if you manage the contingency well, then it's extra profit that comes back to the deal. But if you don't, I don't want you reliant on the fact that that contingency never got spent in order to get your 15 or 20% profit on costs that you're actually aiming for. Any funder out there is going to look at your contingency and deem it to be a cost, so you need to be deeming it as a cost as well. Okay. Next one comes from Ash. Ash says, hi team, is there a way to know the depth of the sewer pipe from the ground level without sending anyone out to the site? So this is a thing called invert levels. I'm going to say some utility providers have this on public record. Other utility providers do not. Okay, so you need to be very, very clear on who your utility provider is, and then try and find out whether or not they've actually got that on record. So a perfect example of those who do is Queensland Urban Utilities. They have a public portal that actually says where the manholes are, I guess the height of the manhole, the depth of the manhole, the depth of the pipe, the diameter of the pipes, all those sorts of things. But other councils and other utility providers do not have those. So now, whilst you might have them on public record, you are going to have to, I guess, irrespective, send a surveyor out on site. That surveyor on site is the only one who can actually give you the true answer, because council records and utility provider records can and are wrong on a regular basis. So very good for your initial site assessment to use those public records. But in your due diligence process, please, please, please go make sure you get a surveyor out there and get them to capture all of those invert levels. So what is natural ground? Where is the manhole? How deep is the manhole? How deep is the pipe? What is the diameter of the pipe? All those sorts of things. Okay, so please, please, please make sure you do that. Lucky last question comes from James. James says, hope it's okay to ask, but if I'm a builder undertaking my own townhouse development or similar, am I correct in thinking that on top of my usual builder's margin, I could expect to apply a developer's margin? Therefore, I should be trying to make deals work for more than my usual builder's margin. Is that correct? And the answer to that is yes, absolutely, James, if you are the lucky person who can actually do that. So you need to pretend from a builder's perspective that you're scoping the job up as if it's a normal everyday job and put your normal everyday margins in there. Then you need to take that hat off and you need to put your developer's hat on, and your developer's hat needs to be looking for the developer's margin as if they're using you as the builder in this particular project. And that is how you're going to compare your project versus how everyone else out there compares their project. Now that's the ideal outcome. That is I guess, the top of the range of the profitability that you could be aiming for. But noting, because you are the developer and the builder all at the same time, you have the ability to squeeze those a little bit. Hey, I might take a little bit of a haircut on my builder's margin or a little bit of a haircut on my development margin in order to get that site off of someone else, because I know that I can compete against them much, much better. So let's just say that the property is worth $1 million. You might say, well, I can spend $1,050,000 for it because I know I've got this extra fat in my system that I can actually deal with. So you're taking a small haircut in order to get that deal and make sure nobody else gets that deal. Now, you don't have to take a haircut on all of it, but you've certainly got a whole bunch of room. If you've got 20% developer's margin and 20% builder's margin, you've got a lot of fat to work with in that system. Anyway, folks, hope you enjoyed that. That is another Sunday session. We do these on the first Sunday of every single month. And so I look forward to seeing your questions. Click on the link below, propertyupdate.info/open-mic, and you can submit your questions to us in advance. That way, that gives me plenty of opportunity to then go and do whatever research I need to do. Now, that said, we run events all the way around the country, and we would love to see you at one of our upcoming events. We run them in Brisbane, Sydney, Melbourne, and Adelaide. We also live stream them all the way around the country. So no matter where you're located, you can actually turn up to one of our events. And so I would like to see you at one of our upcoming events. I'm going to say till then, bye for now, folks. Bye.